how was it growing up in a city like Paris, especially for somebody that then became a visual artist? Like you had access to the Louvre like every day.
I was there every day.
What do you remember from that time of your life, and how do you think it shaped your creativity and your persona?
It gave me that kind of, I think, a strength of the, and I'm talking, I mean, I was inspired. My parents were fashion designers. I grew up in that world, and they dressed a lot of musical artists. My grandfather was a opera singer, so I grew up like around music, fashion, art. Both my parents loved the arts. Actually, we went to Florence every year for the PT, for the fabric show, but and I would come with my parents and my sisters, and we would go to the museums too, and they always loved to travel and see art, and so I grew up around a lot of art. So, and then later on, I don't know how far along I want to go into my history, but because I'm a good mathematician, and my dad was like, oh, that's a better career than an artist, even though he was an artist. But going back to growing up in Paris, seeing art, so my dad studied math. I was kind of forced into, I always painted, always draw, always wrote songs and all this, but I didn't do much of it. I was like really deep into the science, and that's how I graduated from. I went to university, Pierre and Marie Curie, which is like a scientific university. And after that, I was like, I want to do art so bad still. And so then I went to art university. And with that, I had free passes for every museum in Paris or in France that I wanted to. So when I said I went to the Louvre every day, I'm not lying. I was just there every day, and just absorbing. You just.
Do you think there was like one specific painter, or like one artist, or like one? And this doesn't have to be like a visual artist, right? Like any kind of like fascination that you had, while like visiting the Louvre, or like just exploring, art and creativity that kind of made you realize I want to do this too.
Well, I really admired some of the Renaissance painters, and Flemish as well as Italian as well, because somehow they included that kind of esoteric, scientific component to their art, and I got really fascinated by that. So, but then it's not until I went to art school and started understanding how some other more modern painters' process work that I started to appreciate those works too. At first, like seeing an abstract painting, I'm like, okay, I like the composition and everything, but what's the story behind this? And it's not necessarily obvious. And so once I started studying some more obscure painters, obscure for me mostly, like I was not, that's not my first, I was not attracted to those works at first, but then I started learning about them, and I'm like, oh wow, there's actually, or a philosophy, like a whole thing behind it.
But how do you think that that logical side of you, like the pure mathematics thing, kind of drift into your creativity? Like, does it still somehow influence you? Like, how does it?
I am sure, and I'm not, I cannot pinpoint exactly how it does, but it is part of me. It's like everything is part of me, and I'm sure it's included in my work somehow without being conscious of it. Like it's something that's definitely influencing me in some way, and it's always, even talking about all this logic or mathematical stuff, I always read books about this. I'm fascinated with it, and it might not be that obvious in my work, like here it is, I don't.
Sometimes you just absorb and like it just comes out when you don't know,
And I think also part of my process, like I said, it's I get into this meditative space, and I enter actually almost like a dimension that's like free of time and space, and it's like all of a sudden the universe opens up, and I tap into different information, and that's how I create my work. Mostly I have visions,
Yeah.
and if it's a painting or if it's like a music, I have like melodies that come to me, and then I have to transcript them, and then or words, or I think it's part of the whole. Like we can't disconnect.
Yeah. No, it seems like it's very like it's a very universal, like kind of a holistic approach that you have. How does it work? Just like walk us through the process of how you create something.
I start is, well, whatever surface I'm gonna paint, it's blank.
Sure.
I don't know what I'm gonna paint, and then I get into this state. That's why I love to be like, in here in this space where there's nobody and in nature, no distractions, no nothing. So it's easy to just get into the zone, and that's when I start seeing things, and I'm guided to paint whatever I see, and not only the elements, but also what colors I'm gonna use. It's almost like I have no choice. I let it like speak through me, whatever it is, and I'm seeing things, and I get into this, and sometimes it's so intense that I have to kind of even paint quickly because I'm afraid to lose the vision. I'm like, okay. And then later on, I can go back to a painting and rework on more details and shading and things like that. But it's very strong, like it's a vision. So it starts from really nothing, no idea of what I'm gonna do, to letting it like allow.
It'll come out all at once.
Yeah, which is kind of always a bit risky. Like it took me years before I allowed myself to do this because, as an artist, and I think that in any art, you end up having an audience, or people that are gonna see or hear what you did and judge it in a way. And you have to detach yourself from this, because for a long time I was like, wow, I should use this color instead, because no. Now I'm like, I just.
Yeah, that's an important point. I was gonna touch on this later, but let's talk about this because you just mentioned it.
Yeah.
The way people perceive your work, right?
Yeah.
Like the way somebody that buys, or just somebody that just like looks at it and all that. Do you want your audience to feel something specifically? What is the message for the people that see and get this? What do you want them to feel? Like, do you worry about that at all, or like?
I try not to worry, but I know that the positive intention and everything is energy. So whatever you put into your work, they say like, okay, a mother cooks with love for the children, and that food is infused with love, and it's a similar process. Like I really try to infuse my work with like just positive healing intentions, and whoever is ready to receive it, I think people that buy my artwork feel it, because that's probably why they buy it. And I actually have a lot of feedback about this.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what was one of the most like fulfilling
one of the most
feedback you ever got?
Okay, that was pretty instantaneous. It was actually pretty freaky for me. Now I'm used to it, but it was years and years ago. For a moment, we lived in San Francisco, and I had a show in the Mission District over there at the gallery, and that was my first show actually up north. And art was installed and everything. It was the opening. I didn't know that many people in San Francisco, so most of the people that came to the opening were people that liked the gallery or knew. I had like maybe 3 friends, but like I said, I didn't know many people, so I didn't know what to expect. And there's this lady that started crying and screaming, "Who's the artist?" in front of one of my paintings, and it freaked me out. I was like, I'm gonna hide over this. What is this?
She didn't know you.
No, she didn't know me, but she's like crying and screaming for my name, and I'm like, is she? Maybe she's a crazy person. I don't know. And so one of my friends pointed to me, like, "So that's the artist." And then she came and she's like, she had the dream, she saw what, in her dream that was fairly recent was exactly what I painted. Like
No
she
way.
had the same
Really?
thing. And so of course she got the painting and she was like, she was all frazzled and
Sure.
and asking me what my process, but I believe we're all connected, we're all
Well, maybe
everything,
you can't make
we're
that
all
up.
one,
That's-
and when I say like the universe opens and you can tap into information, just like psychic or mediums, they can like have information about you somehow, or we're all there. And so, but that was the first one where that was like the most extreme
Yeah, it's crazy.
reaction, but it was great at the end. But when it
Well,
first
you never
happened,
know.
I was
Right?
like,
That sounds great, though.
maybe I
That
need
must-
my bodyguard.
I think in your stuff, for example, like this amazing one that we have here, there's a lot of recurring themes that I'm noticing in your art, like hands.
The
are a theme.
elements, yeah.
What are some of the most the most inspiring elements for you, and where do they come from? The butterfly, the stars, and the colors too. They seem to be. It's kind of like pop art in a way. Like it's bright, like a pop art
Like I said,
piece, but it's kind of like
choose it.
cosmic,
I don't choose it, and most of my paintings actually can't. I don't know the meaning of them until they're completed, because I have a vision. I know hands are I learned so many healing modalities myself. Like I'm a Reiki practitioner.
Okay.
I study shamanism. I study with a kahuna. I study all kinds of healing arts, not to be like a hands-on healer, but I feel like I'm like I said, I'm infusing all this. So I know hands are very, very healing. So that's always, and then these paintings there that have like more mudas, kind of, different shapes and all this. Everything, the hands might have a different meaning according to the context in what they're done. Like for example, here you have the butterfly. Butterfly is also transformation, it's also like freedom. It's so many different things. And then the colors, I don't choose the colors. They come to me in the vision. So I know each color has different frequencies, or that can, people use colors for therapy, like to healing. And the red is more like exciting and passionate, and it can mean danger too. It can be, a scary thing. The blue is more like peaceful, calming. There's all these kind of meaning behind colors. So usually when I'm done with a painting, I like to do my own interpretation of the painting, but then I actually love that the viewer, like somebody else, gives it their own interpretation, because according to your experiences in life and your culture, whatever, like a butterfly in your culture might mean something else, and in my culture, so I just allow it to be, interpreted by other people, like see how they view it.
There's a lot of, this made me think of a lot of musicians with perfect pitch. Sometimes they see colors, they see each color for a note. That's a form of perfect pitch. I never had that, but that made me think of that. And I think because you're a musician too, how does music and other forms of art come into play for your whole thing? Is it more like, do you feel like, obviously I feel like you're more of a visual artist than a musician, maybe? Or how do you
I feel like I'm
yourself?
the same now, because so I always, when I paint, I hear like it's almost sometimes that simultaneously, I'll have a melody or music that comes along with that painting. So what I used to do,
like original music.
Like original music.
Oh, okay. So you're composing
So before COVID, I would record it on my phone, so I won't lose the idea and continue painting. And then I would rework it, and then I would have to go to a studio with an engineer and help me out. But COVID, the blessing of COVID got me even freer of that because it forced me to learn a DAW, like the software. And so now, because I was always reluctant, like to have a machine interfere, like the computer thing. But now that I learned how to use the music software, I have so much opened up and so much freedom, and I'm writing so much music because I don't need anybody else or something. I just do it actually on the other side of this space, and sometimes it's I'll be working on art, and like I said, I had these melodies or words that come, and I will record them, and then I need to take a break from the art and back away a bit, and then I'll work on the music that's related to the song that's related to the artwork. And then once I'm done with that, because sometimes you have to see something with new eyes, fresh eyes, or hear something with fresh ears. So I'll bounce back and forth, and which is like, it's been the biggest blessing of this.
Yeah, it must be refreshing.
COVID
you
thing,
have like
because now I
new
can
perspective.
do everything on this
Beautiful.
space without.
Yeah, that's great.
So
that's great. Well, speaking of music, your husband plays for Metallica, and you did an amazing work on his bass. That's that one bass that's exposed at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's more of it's different than this, isn't it? Like the style, like it's Aztec, and like it's more like a.
Yeah, so that has a story in itself too. It was the first bass I did for him, and I mean, it was like maybe 16 years ago, I think, because our daughter, who's 16 today, was a baby, and our son is 18. He was a toddler, and we were in Paris.
Okay.
And he was playing a bunch of shows around Europe.
Yep.
So I decided to rent an apartment for 3 months, which was great, in Paris, kind of in the area where I grew up in. I was just there with the kids, and he was doing his shows, and one day he comes back and he has this blank wood bass, not even electronics, no wires, and he gives it to me and he said, "I would love for you to do something with it." I'm like, "I don't have anything." And then I remember my dad, all my art supplies from before I moved to the US were in my dad's cellar. We all have cellars in Europe with all this stuff. And so I went to my dad's cellar and I found this pyrography, like wood burning tools, but they were so old and didn't even know if they were working, and it worked. I'm like, I'm gonna do something there, and because it was connected to my husband, that's the vision I had, is that calendar. So I started doing that right in that apartment in Paris, and then it became kind of his signature instrument for a long time. And then I did many more after that, because you need, they tour so much, you need a set of bass there. Instruments. So I did so many instruments for him after that, and others, like I started getting orders from people that wanted me to paint or would burn on their instruments. So, but it was the same process, except that including in my meditation, like in my, kind of that zone, I included him in it to see what he would like, something. So that's why it's kind of different than what I do.
Was he there with you meditating,
he was not there.
Was it just you?
He was just me,
Okay.
He was working and even know.
That's crazy.
So so then it was at the Met in New York too for a while, and now it's at the Rock and Roll of Fame forever.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm pointing to this because I feel like with a spiritual person like you, I wanted to know that's a great accomplishment, right? Like having like your work at the Met. That's for an artist. That's top of the mountain. No? What does it mean to be accomplished to you? You know what I mean? Because you have like a specific view on, on life. It's like, does accomplishment and success mean any like material? Not even material, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like having something at the Met is like, it's every artist's dream. How do you feel about, you being very accomplished and successful?
See, I don't feel like I think
How
I
do you
get
treat that in your life?
Yeah, but I think I get that from my dad, where it's like never satisfied, like always reaching out for more. Like even my first line of Silk Scars, our very first collection I did in Colette in Paris, which was the top, like every designer craved to me, and that was my first shop that placed her order, and I was like, yeah, and my dad's like, yeah, but you know, you need to sell this, and you need to like, I was like, but isn't that great? You know, he always, like, I had to be even better and better, and whether sometimes I feel mostly like it's an asset, but sometimes I feel like, oh, you know, it'd be nice to also appreciate all my accomplishments, but I feel like I always crave for more, and that what keeps me, my drive, you know, just continue and thriving for even better, because I don't know if an artist like is ever satisfied. We always want to create more and more and do better and better, and so I'm working on that. Like, I'm trying to look back and see, all I did, like, you know.
No, it's interesting. It's the same. It's the same for, I feel like it's the same for every like real artist. And I remember one time as a kid when my dad took me to the Sixtine Chapel for the first time, right? And you know, you look up at the amazing thing and ceiling, and my dad told me that, you know, artists, or at least like art, we do art and creativity because we want to leave something to this world,
like
because
we are
like we're passing, right? Like, and we want
kind of like
leave
being
something.
Immortal.
So do you believe in purpose and destiny? Like, what's the, like, well, like you said before, your drive, like what are you trying to leave behind?
I mean, I've always been very conscious of the short time we have on Earth ever since I was born. Like, it was always like, so my drive is also like, I need to create this and this and this before it's too late. You know, it's like always more and more, which also, you know, is an asset in a way, because I'm super productive, but sometimes I can't take a vacation. You know, it's got its downsides too. I'm like, okay, I should relax, you know. But I'm so happy in what I do, so I think, you know, it's in a way it's a vacation, you know. But I feel like there's so much I have to offer to the world, whether, you know, in any creative field that I do, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's like the fashion design or anything. Like, there's a lot I want to share, and you know, I don't want to be running out of time until I'm doing it. And you're right. Like, it's all about defeating the nature of like our mortality, or, you know. But I've also always been fascinated with you know, what goes on, like life after death. What's that? You know.
I mean, you obviously explore all that in your spiritual practices, right? And do you think there are more effective than others? Like, and how did you get into these practices that you do? And what do you think? What do you think is the benefit on an everyday basis? You know what I mean? For somebody that doesn't do it, like me. All these spiritual practices there are so many, and like a lot of people benefit from different ones, and you know what I mean, a lot of people practice ones instead of others. How did you get into all these practices, and how do you think they benefit your life on a day-to-day basis, you know?
So I mean, everything was always kind of there for me. I had a lot of, you know, when I was a little kid, I had a lot of deja vus, and I was always trying to figure out what they meant. I always had a feeling, I mean, this might sound crazy, but I would, you know, at 6 years old, I would stare at me in the mirror and trying to push my skin away from my face and try to see who the real me was, because I didn't feel like I was belonging here. I was like, what am I doing here? I was, you know, eating the, I don't know if you call it the suc, the plant. So there's these dandelions that grow everywhere in France on the grass or whatever, and I would pick them and I would eat the creamy white thing. We call it the suc. Like, that was my nutrition. Like, I had all these things. I'm like, what am I doing? And then I had like a couple of almost near-death experience. Like I had like this crazy, as a kid in Ireland, we were, and it was like I think 5 or 4 in the morning, and my dad was driving. I was a little kid, and there was black ice on the road, and he had the reflex to just go into a tree, because otherwise we would have fallen down the cliff.
Oh, wow.
So, and it was like such a shock. Like, you know, I felt like I had like a review of my life, and I was like, I don't know, 8 years old or something.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my God. And then that evening, of course, we were stuck, and we got, you know, it was before cell phones and
Sure.
all this, and you're in the middle of the countryside in Ireland at 4 a.m. There's nobody. But that whole experience, at that evening, we ended up at this restaurant. I knew I've never been there in my life. I'm like, oh, I know we're gonna sit at that table. Sure enough, they sit us at that table. And I'm like, I knew what the waiter was gonna tell us exactly to the word. When he came over, like I had these deja vu that were super intense. So I was always curious about, so I knew like deep down, I'm like, I knew I was not supposed to die, because I am living this moment again that I'm supposed to live, you know, things like that. And then I survived a horrible attack in Paris in my 20s. And
Yeah, that relates to your creativity as well. I was going to ask if you please expand on that.
Well,
however you
yes.
want.
So this happened at a point in my life where I had given up on everything I loved, and in my life I was living it like a robot. Really, I left painting, I left singing, I left everything. I did not believe in myself. I was in a bad relationship that kept.
And you were how old?
I was in my early 20s. I was like living like a robot, like a zombie almost, like nothing made sense. I didn't like my life and all this. And all of a sudden, boom, there's this guy that attacks me, a stranger. So in the street, he follows me and tries to headbutts me. I'm like falling down the stairs. My bag falls down the stairs, so I knew he was not after my bag. Grabbed my hair, tried to knock me out on the side of the stairs there, and all this. And you know, in Paris, in apartment buildings, the old ones, you have sometimes windows in the middle of the staircase, like this,
yeah.
And I was like, my head down, and I was trying to force my neck so he wouldn't knock me out, or hurt my head so much. And there's a moment, and I really remember, even though it was a fraction of a second, where I looked up at the sky through that window, and everything came back. Like I'm not gonna die like this. I have so much to do, and this adrenaline, and then I turned around and I fought this guy, and after which it felt like hours of fighting, but it was indeed just 20 minutes, which is still very long.
Long time, yeah.
I knew, because I knew the time I went into my apartment building, and I knew when the rescue, the firefighters came first to come rescue, and that lapse of time was 20 minutes, and then he ran away, and the whole healing process started right there, and from that moment, everything spiritual, like I started reading more books and about the meaning of life, about a purpose, about, when I started including these practices, whether it's meditation, automatic writing, things that helped me heal, and I had given up on singing, and now my breath was kind of stuck here because I was still in shock, and so I learned also healing through singing, but through sound and toning, and all this not only saved my life, but gave me a meaning and purpose. So it saved me emotionally, mentally, physically, on every level. That's the only thing. And over a year after that, I was called with the police and doing I felt like I was in a movie, behind the fake mirror, who's the guy, and it was in the news and all this stuff. And at first I wanted to kind of forget that episode and try to move on, but it was still there. It's kind of like your shadow or something. You have to face it and overcome it to to be able to move on and maybe use that pain or use that and transform it into something beautiful, you know? And so that's really, I think, that turning point where spirituality came more into my life. And I noticed that whenever there was a day where I was like letting go and not doing like the meditation and recentering myself, I would be like all frazzled. Now it's like I'm disciplined, but I'm okay with doing it. Like I feel like my meditation is also happens when I'm painting or when I'm writing music.
Yeah.
So it's kind of in my
It's part of
my
you.
life. So yeah, but that was the defining moment. I feel like that was like, and all of a sudden synchronicity started to happen and all this, and I, you know, it just, yeah.
Well, based on what you just said, trauma, near-death experiences and all that's pretty heavy stuff, and I feel that the final question here for me would be, what do you appreciate about your life right now as, you know, as who you are now as an artist, but also as a human being? Because like for you, those are connected. There's the same thing. You're the one person, right?
Yes.
After living through all of this and like realizing that you have meaning and you have artistic meaning because of these traumas, what do you appreciate today, day to day? Like what is it that's something that makes your life worth
I think
living?
it's for me, it's being fully me and not hiding behind you know, like just allowing myself to express myself fully, if that makes sense. Like before that traumatic event, I was saying, like maybe I was, and you know, I still have fears. Everybody has fears. We're all human. But I was maybe too fearful of being fully me and showing who I was. I think this now in where I'm at, it's almost like I don't worry so much about judgment and all this because I've survived so many things and went through so many things. And, you know, I just gave 2 examples, but of course, you know, anybody's life is full of like hardships and different things. But I feel that every step, whether it's good or bad, has taken me to where I am today. And so I'm grateful for everything that happened because I feel like it needed to happen for me to be who I am. Yeah. And so that's what I appreciate today is like, okay, this is me, and I can appreciate the strength I have to have been through this and overcame this. I appreciate that I was able to see the bigger picture and see that this is what got me to here, you know, like little things like that. But really, I'm really grateful now to be able to express myself almost freely and not without worring, you know.
Yeah. Let me just ask one last thing, because it's kind of connected to this. Do you are your kids like seeing your work and seeing all of this, all this coming out of it?
I think that's why they're so.
Because that's different, like seeing like me as a like semi-stranger versus you know, like I remember my dad like walking me through Pink Floyd records and all that, and like telling me, oh, that's about to happen, and that's kind of how. And he bought me my books and like my clothes and all that, like so you kind of like live and develop as a person through your parents, like if you have that kind of relationship, right? Are your kids? You know, with you and your husband too, like such a creative, you know,
they're super
combination.
creative.
How do you like communicate with your kids like this kind of stuff? You know what I mean? The healing and
I think they see through, you know how they say like the kids will do what they see you do and not what you tell them to do. You know, I think that's what happened with our kids, and they're super creative. Musical. They're my daughter's an amazing artist. She's a drummer too, and she plays bass. But my son also writes all his music and plays bass primarily, but multiple instrument. And I think it's just them growing up in our household and seeing all that's around. We never forced them to anything. I never gave my daughter a paintbrush like this. It's available. same with our son. He picked up instruments, but we never like hear, because I felt like when I grew up, I was forced into things, and this is, maybe you will, connect with this. It's like the European way. We're forced to learn things that we don't really necessarily care about.
And that's the best way to like drive somebody away from that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I didn't want to force them to do anything, and they navigated through, and then they just picked up these things naturally. And I think for me, that's the best way. What if you wanted to do something else? What if, Ty wanted to become a lawyer and do something else? Well, I give him all the blessings. He ended up being a musician, and a great musician, but I'm proud of him, but I would be proud of them no matter what. But they grew up in that environment. And actually my husband recently, because he's out of town a lot, he's out of town today, but he says, recently when he came back home and he's hearing in the house, he's hearing bass guitar, and then he's hearing the drums, because my daughter's on the drums, and then he's hearing me scream, not scream, but like sing loud, and he's like, oh, it's amazing.
That's my life every day, and now I get more of that, more of my job.
But we love it. I love it. Sometimes because they're in school right now, but then when they come back from school, they all start playing. And then when I get back to the house and I hear all this music, it's awesome. I love it, And in my, they don't play. They each play in their own room, so they don't play. It's not, she plays a different rhythm. He plays something else.
Oh yeah.
It's like being in a rehearsal studio, where every band is like. But I just love it, and I am actually now. I feel that the parents are inspired by the kids. It's like it's all this synergy, like just really, like I feel like, oh, they're playing, I'm hearing them, and I'm inspired to do more, and we all inspire each other in that way. So it's very,
yeah, that sounds very inspiring.
Yeah.